Hola, muy buenos días, Riverbend. ¿Cómo está? Yo soy un americano y yo soy un gringo. When I was in high school, in between my sophomore year and my junior year, I was a foreign exchange student in Santiago, Chile. The next summer, between my junior and senior year, I was an exchange student at the University of Valencia in Spain. And pretty much all the Spanish I know, you just heard. But it was an amazing experience for me, and I really immersed myself in the Chilean and in the Spanish culture. I ate enough paella in Spain that my skin started to turn like the color of saffron. But I enjoyed it very much, and there were a couple of things that I learned. Because I was in high school and I was a foreign exchange student, I went to school at an all-boys school, a private school in Santiago, Chile, and I went to the University of Valencia in Valencia, and I realized, after being with these young teenagers from Santiago and then from all over Europe, actually, in Valencia, I realized that teenagers are teenagers no matter where they come from, and that teenage boys have an infinite capacity for stupid. And it doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter whether you're from Sweden or from Germany or from Austria or from Mexico or Guatemala or South America. It didn't matter. I realized that teenage boys are teenage boys no matter where they're from, anywhere in the world. And I was a teenage boy among teenage boys in both Spain and in Chile. But the other thing that I realized, that I learned as an exchange student, was how hard it is to be a stranger in a strange land. I really wanted to fit in. I really wanted to immerse myself in the culture, but I realized the challenge of being assimilated and authentic in another culture, not just because of the language, but because I missed home. 4 weeks ago, we began a conversation, a study about the nature of faith. And we are basing that study on the outline that is given to us in one chapter of one book in the Bible. It is the 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. And Hebrews chapter 11 begins with the most concise definition of faith that we have in the Bible. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, defines faith this way. It says, faith is confidence in what we hope for, the assurance of what we do not yet see. And the author of the book of Hebrews says, I'm going to show you what that definition looks like in the lives of real people. And throughout Hebrews chapter 11, we have thumbnail biographical sketches of what I call the heroes of the faith, the Hall of Fame of faith. And over the last few weeks, we learned lessons about faith from Abel, and we learned lessons about faith from Enoch. And last week, we learned lessons about faith from Noah. But today, we learn our lesson about faith, what does faith look like, from a man named Abraham. And the author of the book of Hebrews describes Abraham's faith this way. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to this city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had the opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Today I want to talk about lessons of faith as foreign exchange students from heaven, as foreigners in a foreign land, as strangers in a strange world. What does our faith look like? And I want to suggest that in an Abrahamic faith, a Hall of Fame faith is a paradoxical faith. It is challenging to live a faith of a foreigner in the world today. But before we begin to look at that, would you take a moment and pray with me? Father in heaven, I would ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would be pleasing in your sight, that you would use your words spoken by your servant and anointed by your Spirit to challenge our faith and to stretch us in it. I pray that for myself and for my family and for all of us here, for I ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. The life of Abraham takes up 14 chapters in the book of Genesis. Abraham is born in Genesis chapter 11, and he dies in Genesis chapter 25. In the 12 chapters in between, Abraham has some amazing adventures as a stranger in a strange land. There's the story of his sacrifice of his only son, Isaac. There's a story of rescuing his cousin Lot from Sodom and Gomorrah. There's a story of giving his wife away in Egypt. There are many stories that you could point to that teach us lessons about what it means to live a foreign exchange faith. But the author of the book of Hebrews focuses in on the Abrahamic covenant, the call of Abraham that came to him while he was living in Mesopotamia in a town called Haran. In Genesis chapter 12, this is the Abrahamic call. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to a land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went as the Lord told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. The author of the book of Hebrews tells us that Abraham was looking for a city, a heavenly city, whose foundations and whose architect and builder was God. He was looking for a better country, a heavenly one. And in this pursuit, as a foreigner in a foreign land, we learn a couple of lessons about the faith of Abraham, what it means to have a Hall of Fame faith. And I want to suggest that it is a paradox, that a Hall of Fame faith is more difficult than a street-level faith. It is a faith that practices paradoxical behavior. For example, a Hall of Fame faith is a faith that holds on by letting go. It's a faith of holding on while letting go. What I mean by that is, in order to sort through the things that are worth believing, we have to let go of the things that are not. I'm going to share something with you today, and it's the most controversial thing I have ever said from the front of Riverbend Church. From this platform, I have never said anything that's quite as dangerous as what I'm about to say to you today. It is one of those watershed statements. Once I say it, it cannot be unsaid. And I realize that in saying it, there will be those of you here who say, well, that's it, I'm done. I can no longer participate in a place that would say something like that. On the other hand, there may be some of you who hear what I'm about to say, and you say, I've finally found my home. It is good to be home, and it's good to know that this is what you think and what Riverbend Church thinks. And so I'm going to share with you the most dangerous thing I have ever said at Riverbend Church. Are you ready? You buckled up there, sports fans? Because here it comes. I like Aggies. I know you can't unhear that, and I realize there are some of you who are applauding, and you're saying, we're finally at home, but there are others of you who I am certain in this moment are saying, I cannot associate with the place where a person would say that they like Aggies, but I can't help it. I do. I really do. Some of my best friends are Aggies. In fact, my very best friend from Dallas is an Aggie graduate from 30 years ago. He's worn his ring, his Aggie ring, every day that I've known him. It's worn smooth because it's been on his hand for 30 years. He's my very best friend, and I've met hundreds, if not thousands, of people who have graduated from A&M, and I can tell you that a clear majority of them, if not all of them, are wonderful and interesting people. And I like the traditions, and I like the values. I like the culture of Texas A&M. And I know that once I said that, you cannot unhear it. But I've learned one thing that's important about Aggies. It's that once you graduate from Texas A&M University, once you are an Aggie, you will always be an Aggie. Once you drink that Kool-Aid, it never gets out of your DNA. You are an Aggie for life. It doesn't matter if you leave College Station and you go and you live among the Horned Frogs of Fort Worth, or you go out and you live among the Red Raiders of Lubbock, Texas, or if you come to Austin and you live among the Longhorns, or God forbid, you go to Norman, Oklahoma, and you live among the Sooners. When you're an Aggie, you are always an Aggie. You see, Abram was a Chaldean. He was a Mesopotamian. He was born in a place called Ur of the Chaldeans. Anthropologists tell us that Ur of the Chaldees, or Ur of the Chaldeans, was down at the mouth of the Euphrates River. And it was in a place that archaeologists call the Fertile Crescent. The Fertile Crescent was sort of a quarter moon-shaped area that ran from the southern parts of Iran all the way up to Turkey, all the way down to Palestine, almost to Egypt. And 10,000 years before the time of Christ, this was where civilization was born. Anthropologists believe that because of the fertility and the verdant nature of the Fertile Crescent, that people began to develop forms of domesticated animals and domesticated agriculture. They believe that this is the place where economic systems were born, because people were bartering, exchanging grains for animals, and the exchange of conversation. Actually, there are some anthropologists that believe that written language was birthed in the Fertile Crescent. There are even anthropologists who believe that the wheel was invented in the Fertile Crescent, and all of that information was taken throughout the Western world. Abraham was born in Ur of the Chaldees. But at some point after he was married to his wife Sarai, his father decided to move from Ur of the Chaldees to the land of Canaan. Tells us in the book of Genesis that Abraham's father, his name was Terah, took his family and his nieces and his nephews, and they moved all the way up the Euphrates River to the headwaters. They didn't make it to Canaan. They made it to a village called Haran. It was there in Haran where Abraham lived until he was 75 years old. At 75, he received a word that is recorded for us in Hebrews chapter 11. It says, by faith Abraham, when called when he was living in Haran to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Faith is easy if nothing ever changes. It's easy for us to be men and women of faith if we never encounter unexpected change or trauma or difficulty. If the world just stayed the same, faith was easy. And that's how most of us live by faith. We create our comfort zone. We believe in the things that make us comfortable, and we create our home, and we create our families, and we create our careers, and we create our life. And that takes faith. It's a commendable thing. But a Hall of Fame faith requires not just the holding on to these things, but a willingness to let them go. You see, we are reckless with our affections. We are careful with or careless with our aspirations. And we chase after things that will not satisfy us. And we hold on to things that will eventually disappear or destroy us. And because we are careless and reckless with our affections, we hold things that we should let go of too tightly. And a Hall of Fame faith is the kind of faith that holds on by letting go. And the chief attribute of a person who is living with this Abrahamic Hall of Fame faith is that they embrace change. They realize that we are living in a world where the only thing that will never change is that everything eventually will change. And a Hall of Fame faith says, I'm okay with that. Because the things that I'm holding on to, I hold on to them by letting them go. By trusting God with those things. The first attribute of a Hall of Fame faith is that it holds on by letting go. The second attribute of a Hall of Fame faith is that it lives in the already while not yet. It's living in the already while in the not yet. And what I mean by that is it's fully present in the moment, even though it knows that it's still on the journey. It still has a ways to go. When I was an exchange student in South America, I wanted to fit in desperately. I wanted to learn the culture and learn the language. And I had only had 1 year of Spanish as a sophomore in high school, so I could barely introduce myself. But the family that I moved in with in Santiago, Chile, was a family who said, we're not going to speak any English to you. Now, they were all fluent in English. In fact, the father of the household was the president of the National Bank of Chile. My older brother, Juan Pablo, became an admiral in the Chilean Navy. My brother, Felipe, who was my classmate, became a cardiologist and the president of the medical school in Santiago. These were intelligent and fluent people in English, but they refused to speak English to me. They said, we want you to learn Spanish, so we are only going to speak to you in Spanish. And I went to an all-boys Spanish high school, and the boys in the high school enjoyed tutoring me and teaching me Spanish, so I picked up an amazing amount of Spanish in just 3.5 months. By the time that I got home, I actually tested out of second and third year Spanish and went directly to honors Spanish in my second year as a junior in high school. So that when I went back to Valencia, when I went to Valencia to go to the University of Valencia the summer after my junior year, I spoke fluent enough Spanish that the people in Valencia thought I was from Chile. They say, ¿Estás chileno? I say, sí, de Santiago. I'm from there. Now, I never really picked up the Castellana Valencia thing, but they thought I was South American. In fact, I would serve as a translator for many times when my classmates and I were going out on the town. And by the time that summer was coming to a close, I felt like I was fully immersed in the Spanish culture and fully fluent. I could understand. In fact, we would go to this bar that was just outside of the campus in Valencia, and every day we'd get into debates with the local barflies and the bartenders, and we'd talk about politics, and we'd talk about music, and we'd talk about art, we'd talk about bullfighting and things like that. And the conversations were exclusively in Spanish. And there was one time when I was sitting there and I was having a debate with the bartender, and he was telling me how terrible the American people were, that they were persecuting the Native Americans, that they robbed them of their lands, and that no one could be an American with a clean conscience. And in perfect Spanish, I said to him, excuse me, but what language do they speak in Mexico and Central America and most of South America? I think the language that they speak is not the language of the Incas or the Mayans. They speak Spanish. Why do they speak Spanish? Did you ever hear of a guy named Cortez? Do you know who the conquistadors were? And I embellished my argument with a string of words that my Chilean brothers had taught me that they thought were hilarious. Because they would teach me these words, and every time I would say them, they would just crack up because these were words that you didn't say out loud to anyone. They taught me the most vile and corrosive curse words in the Spanish language, and I laid all of them on this bartender when I was incriminating the Spanish people. He responded, as a typical Spaniard would, by leaping over the bar, grabbing me by the throat, and beating my head on the concrete floor until my classmates pulled him off. If they hadn't done that, I would have been muerto in Valenciana. You see, I thought I knew it. I thought I had it down. I thought it was all that. I was immersed in the culture. I was talking. I was having conversations. I was making arguments. It takes faith to do that. It takes faith to develop a skill. It takes faith to pursue your dreams. It takes faith to develop a talent or an ability. It takes faith to build a life, but it takes an extraordinary faith to realize that I never arrive. It takes a Hall of Fame level of faith, not just to accumulate and to acquire and to pursue your dreams and your hopes and build your career and your family. It takes a Hall of Fame level of faith to stay teachable, to stay humble. You've heard the phrase, as long as you're green, you will grow. As soon as you are ripe, you rot. That is a Hall of Fame level faith. It is living in the already while in the not yet. I am fully immersed in this world. I am fully cognizant of the world that I am in, but I am never done. I am always teachable. I am always eager to understand, to learn, to know, especially from those who are different than I am, who disagree with me. It's a Hall of Fame faith who is willing to live in the already while thinking of longing for the not yet. It's a Hall of Fame faith that holds on by letting go and embraces change. And it's a Hall of Fame faith is another paradox that is being both and because of either or. Being both and because of either or. I have this theory that we navigate in the gray, we navigate in the ambiguity of life, and most of life is ambiguous, and most of life is the gray. We are flying blind, we are flying in the fog, but the only way to navigate in the uncertainty of the world that we live in is to know what your convictions are, is to know what your true north is. It's only because I have developed the either or, the kind of person that I said, I will be this, and I will not give in to that, because I have become the person that I believe I should be. That allows me to be gracious and generous and to navigate in the gray. It's interesting in Hebrews chapter 11, in verses 14 and 15, it says, people who say such things, people who are longing for a better place, show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had the opportunity to return. They know where they're headed is not where they've been. Instead, they are longing for a better country, a heavenly one. When I was living in Valencia, Spain, I was dying for a hamburguesa. I was constantly asking my friends, people I would meet in the town, I said, where can I get a hamburger? Where can I get an hamburguesa? And there were no McDonald's anywhere in Valencia. There wasn't even a Burger King in Valencia. There certainly couldn't have been a Jack in the Box, because in Spanish you would call it the hack in the box, and that would be bad. But there's 9 McDonald's. I Googled it. There's 9 McDonald's in the city of Valencia today. There was none. There wasn't even a place to get a hamburger. And I was jonesing for a hamburger all summer long. Where can I get a hamburger? And one of my professors said, I think there's a restaurant, it's not far from campus, and I think they have hamburgers on the menu. And so I said, okay, I gotta go. And I go to this place, and I walk in, and sure enough, on the menu it says, hamburguesas. I'm like, dame una hamburguesa. Oh. And then they brought out their hamburguesa. And I'm looking at it going, ¿qué es eso? It was a piece of bread with like a meatball on it. And worst of all, it was a meatball con mostaza. Mostaza is Spanish for mustard. And I went, no, soy americano. We don't put mustard on hamburgers. That's wrong. You put mustard on hot dogs. You put ketchup on hamburgers. And he was all apologetic, oh, lo siento, I'm sorry. What can I do? And I said, you can make me a real hamburger. And so he went in the kitchen and brought the chef out, and I explained, you don't make the hamburger into a ball. You make it into a patty. You make it flat. And then you put it in a skillet, and you fry it, and then you put it on a bun. I said, bring what kind of bread do you have? And they brought out loaves of bread and these long rolls, and then they brought out a Kaiser roll kind of thing. I said, that's what you want. Ese pan. And I said, con lechuga, y tomate, y cebolla, and ketchup. And you put that on the hamburger. And I said, pero la más importante es queso. It has to have queso, hamburguesa con queso. And they're like, queso? And it's not queso like you get over at Maudie's, that it's the lick. It was just cheese. Just put a piece of cheese, make a cheeseburger. That's an American hamburger. And so they went back in the kitchen and they worked on it, and they had this goat cheese thing they put, and they put tomato and lettuce and onion, and they brought it out. And it was wonderful. A week later on the menu, or hamburguesas americano con queso. But you see, I think this is what faith requires. What faith requires is for us to be fully present in the moment. It requires for us to be aware of where we are, because we know that there's more. But it's not just knowing that there's more, it's realizing that we are the ones. It is on us to give. It is on us to make the world a better place. It is on us to make the people around us better. That even though we are headed for a heavenly home and this world is not our home, I am only passing through. I want to leave it better than when I found it. Because it takes faith. It takes faith to appreciate the beauty of the world, and it takes faith to be thankful, but it takes a Hall of Fame level faith to say, in so much as I can, I will try to make your life better. I will try to make the world a better place. I will try to make this world, this life, better than what I found when I got here. Because a Hall of Fame faith is a faith that understands that it's not just the either or, it's the both and. And I can make the world a better place as long as I am living by faith. And that's what it means. I think it's this paradox of faith. It's being both and, because I've already done the either or. It is living with this sense of I'm fully present. I'm living already while not yet. So I stay teachable, I stay humble, and holding on by letting go. And I stay gracious, and I hold loosely, and I embrace change. These are the attributes of Abraham's faith. You see, Abraham was a game changer. Do you realize that most of the Western world considers Abraham the father of their faith? Abraham is a patriarch in 3 of the great religions of the Western world. He's obviously a patriarch, along with Isaac and Jacob, of Judaism. And he's obviously, and he's a patriarch of Christianity. Without Judaism, we don't have a rabbi who is our Savior. In John chapter 8, verse 58, Jesus makes the outrageous statement. He says, before Abraham was, I am. He's basically saying, I am before Abraham. Abraham came because I am. Abraham is a patriarch in the Christian tradition, and Abraham is the patriarch in the Ishmaelite tradition. This is the father of Ishmael, which is the father of Islam. And the Muslims consider Abraham a patriarch of their faith. You see, the author of the book of Hebrews, in cataloging the Hall of Fame of Faith, comes to these 14 chapters in the book of Genesis and said, this is what faith looks like. And of all of the adventures that Abraham undertakes, he focuses on the call and his response, his paradoxical response. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8, the author of Hebrews points to Abraham and says, by faith Abraham, when called to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith he made his home in the promised land like a stranger, like a foreign exchange student. Like a stranger in a strange land, a foreigner in a foreign country, he lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things that they had been promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on the earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had the opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. And then he concludes, or the author of Hebrews concludes, with the end of verse 16. And verse 16 ends by saying, therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, because he has prepared a city for them, because they live as strangers in a strange land, foreigners in a foreign place, exchange students of heaven. Yo no hablo mucho español, porque yo soy americano. Yo soy un gringo. Pero escúchame, la idea más importante. ¿Listo? Yo soy un ciudadano del cielo. ¿Claro? ¿Verdad? Dígame en español. Amén. Amen.